oh, flipping houses. Let me go try to flip a house, right? Oh, let me do subject to and wholesaling because that's the next thing I saw, right? When you do that, what happens is that you never become the dominating expert in that industry. And I think that all big money is made by being a subject matter expert.
Welcome to the Raquel Show. This show is for entrepreneurs who want to play bigger in business and in life. And there are people that you meet in life that the more you get to know them, you start to see their flaws or how they portray themselves either online or in person on stage. And they aren't really necessarily that person. But then on the flip side, you meet people where you get to know them. And the more that you get to know them, you're impressed, amazed, and absolutely blessed to have them in your lives. And that is who is on my show today. He is very special. And I knew from the time that I met him and his wife and had a gut feeling that they were going to be special people in this world. He's got a lot of knowledge to share today. He takes leadership to a whole new level. And he's been an entrepreneur for 11 years and is the president of Kinetic and a real estate investor. Welcome to the show, Juan Ruan.
Thank you so much, Raquel. Wow, what an introduction. I am excited, humbled, and just privileged to be on your show and talking to your audience. So very excited for this.
Yes, I am so excited for our audience, our community, and I love talking to people like you because you've been at this for a while. For 11 years, you have a wide variety of experience. And I think that this podcast could be honestly a week just interviewing you because you're just such an interesting human being. But we're just going to dive right into it. Like, what would you say, because you're an active investor, you've built different businesses, what actually drives you to do these things?
So when I first started as an entrepreneur, I was 18 years old. This is in 2012. And at the time, I was a full-time student at UC San Diego, studying engineering. I had 3 jobs at the time. And then I added a marketing business onto all of it. And I think that what really drove me to do that was that I was so unsatisfied with the results that I was getting because I saw my parents work so hard, right? Even 20 years later, they were self-employed. They owned a restaurant and they worked so hard 7 days a week. They took 2 days off. Christmas and New Year's were the only 2 days that they shut the restaurant off, and they were the main operators. So seeing them pay that amount of price, right, and sacrifice that much, I was willing to do almost like whatever it takes in a sense of willing to pay a price, right, and sacrifice because of what I saw them do. So in honor of their sacrifice, that's really what drove me to explore all these different ventures, start a business even on top of having 3 part-time jobs while in college. And yeah, I think it really roots from my parents and my family.
Well, we definitely share that. And I didn't know that because my parents owned a business growing up. And the only 2 days that we ever took off was Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah.
It was open 24/7, I felt like. So do you ever deal with self-doubt when you go into an unknown territory? Because you started, like you said, you started at 18, you had a network marketing business. And we're going to talk about all the different businesses that you built, from Airbnbs to flips to all these things to being president, right? Do you ever deal with self-doubt when you go into unfamiliar territory?
Absolutely. I think that at every new venture, right, or anything new that you take on, it's always unsure, right? There's always uncertainty. I think what I look at is more long-term. I think about if I'm going to start something and it would be worthwhile long-term, then I'm willing to go through the obstacles, the self-doubt, and all the things that are required to learn. However, I think that coming into it, if you're going to be doing this long-term, then it's worth learning, right? If you're going to do this only for a year or 2 years, then it might not be worth spending the time and effort to learn it. So that's kind of how I guess, gauge whether I'll take on an opportunity or not, or be involved in something or not.
So I'm curious, just because I got to meet you through this journey, what made you decide to be a president of a brokerage, Kinetic Real Estate?
That's funny. Actually, I never thought I would be president of Kinetic Real Estate. And even when Kevin, who is the founder of Kinetic Real Estate, asked me in 2021, I was so like surprised for him even to ask me, because Kevin and I had started two other businesses before I joined Kinetic Real Estate or was a part of Kinetic Real Estate. We started an Airbnb business, a short-term rental management company, and then also a real estate investment company. And while we were operating those, he asked me multiple times since he started Kinetic that I should come and work at Kinetic. And I just didn't see what value I'd be able to provide based off of where Kinetic was at the time. However, when we actually went to a conference, it was like a mastermind workshop. It was one of Grant Cardone's really expensive 10X ventures that we went to in Phoenix. And that's actually where I met you for the first time as well, that evening when we went for dinner. But at that time, when they were talking about scaling the business, I think Kevin really got a insider vision of like what Kinetic Real Estate could really be. And once he painted that vision, then I saw myself as like an opportunity to be able to add value. And at the time I was still managing, I think, 30 some Airbnb properties. So I was super busy already still, but then I ended up transitioning once I really saw what he was looking to build, which involved a lot of people, which then I saw, I had been working with building teams, leading teams, building entrepreneurs, things like that for quite a few years at the time. So then I saw value as me being able to add value to Kinetic. And 3 months later, then Kevin asked me to be the president. So I was like, okay, I don't know what that means, but sure.
I love it. And there's like a lot of roles in our real estate industry. We take on different things and we don't exactly know what it means, but I can say without a shadow of a doubt, you've been an absolute game changer to the company. And I don't think that Kinetic would be where they're at today without you and your leadership. So when it comes to building and scaling businesses, and I've seen that even with the brokerage, is with all the businesses that you've started, I think people look at on social media, or if people have known you where you're at today, is like everything's gone perfect. There wasn't really any failures. And I think we can learn a lot when people have been in the business for a really long time. Were there any big failures in your journey when you started, or things that you shut off or discovered about yourself as an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. I think that it's funny you say that, because I've been reflecting on how I can go back and share more of the stories as an early entrepreneur. Because like you said, right, most people see you now or they meet you now and they only know you for who you are now, but they don't know the price you paid. They don't know the sacrifices that you've made. So you can only imagine, as an 18-year-old starting a business, what could I know? Right? I literally was the youngest person in every room that I stepped into. There was a lot of self-doubt, a lot of uncertainty on whether I'd be successful, on whether what I was doing was the right thing for me at the time. Yeah. And it was very like unwalked path in my family, right? To be an entrepreneur, to start a business and not be self-employed, but start a business where you can create leverage and you can build something long-term, leading other people, things like that. And I think in the beginning, I used everything that was against me as a reason of why I needed to bring so much more value, right? And what I mean by that is, when I was young, when I started my first business, I didn't even own a car. I was literally taking the bus to some of the trainings that I had to go to, some of the sales training that I had to go to. And then I got my first car, which was a Honda Civic, right? At 18 years old. And I didn't really own like super like sharp clothes or anything like that. So I probably went to like H&M to buy clothes. And then I would literally show up to appointments where we'd show up to home appointments. I would leave my car like 3 or 4 blocks away, because even though it was like a brand new Honda Civic, I was just like, this is not going to help me. I'm already young. Like I drive, like it's a basic car, but I'm like, I just want literally nothing to go against me, because I have so many things going against me already. So I would dress super sharp. I would show up early. I would bring so much value. And I think that for years, I honestly had a hard time overcoming that, thinking about, am I really worthy? Like, am I really bringing enough value? And what really shifted for me was after like 2 or 3 years in that business, I saw probably 90% of the people that started with me or that were already in that business when I started no longer be a part of the business, right? Meaning that they had moved on to something else. And I think that it's then that I realized I didn't miss one training, by the way. Like I think for 8 years, maybe, I never missed a training. It was 2 to 3 times a week and I didn't miss, right? And I think at that point, those were little building blocks that built my confidence to say, you know what, I can trust myself. I am the person that can provide value when people are phasing in and out of the business. And I see that in real estate as well today, where agents, have a great year and everything is amazing. But then, right now we're seeing it, right? Where everything is not so great. And most people are going to phase out. And that's the reality of it, right? And when everything is not rainbows and sunshine and everything is going the way that you wanted, those are the times that I think real entrepreneurs are born. I think when everything is going well, everyone's making money, everyone claims to be an entrepreneur, but the real ones are able to weather through the valleys and the storms and come out on the other side and then have that confidence to say, you know what, I've experienced all of this and there's so many more failures even like now that we've experienced in investing and building kinetic real estate, all these different things. But yeah, I think that that's a really long answer to say that absolutely, there's been so many failures along the journey that are great learning experiences overall.
What advice would you give to somebody? Because you said it, a lot of our audience in our community is in real estate and is going through a shift or going through just something different that they're not used to. What would be your advice to them to have them keep going, or questions to ask themselves? Is this business really for them?
I think 2 things that comes top of mind. Number 1 is, who are you hanging out around? And if everyone around you is claiming doom and gloom, you're most likely going to be thinking that way too. If everyone around you is looking at the current market or the current situation as an opportunity, then you're going to probably look for an opportunity too. So number 1 is community. Like, what masterminds are you a part of? What community are you a part of? Who are you spending every day around? And then the second thing is getting a coach, right? A coach, mentor that can guide you. Sometimes it's even a friend. I find that, as a new entrepreneur, new real estate agent or whatnot, sometimes they're not able to afford like a coach or a mentor, which was where I was at in the beginning. But I think that if you find even a friend a little bit 1 or 2 steps further ahead of you, they can guide you at least up to where they're at, for you then to be able to afford a coach, a mentor. And sometimes I believe that a coach and a mentor is not even necessarily paid monetarily. Like sometimes there's other ways you can add value to a coach or a mentor where you're not taking a ton of their time, but there's a strong enough relationship built where you can have access to relationships and not necessarily have like a formal coaching relationship.
So well said. And I love how you took it back to, you can find mentorships, you can find masterminds, you can find community and find people in your corner. And you're somebody that I see that constantly levels up in growth and business and is always investing in themselves. What would you say would be different today from the time that you started, whether it was with a coach, and what do you look for today in finding those trusted advisors or people in your corner as you're starting to level up every single year?
I think it's interesting to see our current scope in business, right? Where so many people claim to be coaches. So many people claim to be mentors, coaches. I think I saw this meme or something along the lines where it was like, oh, a realtor asked to speak in one panel and then like they claim themselves to be a coach and then like start a podcast or something. I thought that was really funny because I think that unless you've built something that you're coaching someone through, then you're not really a coach. And I don't necessarily mean that in any offensive way, but it's the same idea as if you were to walk into a gym and someone's a personal trainer. I mean, as natural human beings, we're looking to see if they're fit, right? If they're unfit, then how would we believe that they can coach us to become fit? And I think that in business, it's a little bit harder to determine that because of the persona that you can, portray to be on social media and all these different things. That in business, it's almost like, well, show me what you've built, right? And if I'm being coached by someone that is building what I'm building, then I think that that's a valid coach or mentor. I think there's an overall mentorship towards entrepreneurship, but if there's specific niches that you're trying to build, I mean, one of the big reasons why we have you as our coach is because we're building a brokerage, right? And we know that you have so much experience in building a very successful brokerage and building teams and real estate and all these different things. So we know that you understand that world. So yeah, I think that it comes down to evaluating what they have built and what are the results that they have gotten in order to really take on that advice and apply it.
Well, thank you for giving us all that insight, because even with social media today, I think there's a lot of gurus that say that they're gurus or courses. And I know a lot of people get sucked into, hey, they've got a course and they can do it. And speaking of courses, and you're an Airbnb investor or was an Airbnb. I would love to know your thoughts around Airbnb, flipping the investing. We're going to go into the investing side, because there's a lot of agents that make a lot of money, or they came off a really good year, or they make their clients wealthy, yet we forget to put our own future in place as far as a plan. So let's talk about investing, and on the flip side, how did you get into it? What advice would you give to people today when it comes to investing and hearing all these bright and shiny objects?
Absolutely. I think I've had experience in multiple areas of investing in real estate. And I started with something called rental arbitrage on Airbnb, which is almost what costs the less to get into, aside from other aspects of finding deals and wholesaling real estate or signing contracts, is that I started in rental arbitrage. And what that meant was that we would essentially talk to homeowners that couldn't sell or lease their house. We would tell them that we would lease their property, then furnish it, and we were going to put it on Airbnb. So I built a portfolio right around 2020 when COVID first hit. I started in 2018, where I was managing 105 listings here in the Bay Area and a handful in Sacramento. And that was my full-time thing, right? I was spending probably 60, 70, 80 hours managing those properties. And I also was still building the network marketing business, but that was my main thing at the time. And what I realized through that business is that it's not investing in real estate. Airbnb is a hospitality business. It's literally a completely different active income business, and it's not investing in real estate. Investing in real estate, in my opinion, is buying real estate and being able to take advantage of tax benefits from it, being able to take advantage of equity, appreciation, the things that real estate is meant to do. We flip houses as well. I also think that investing in real estate, flipping houses, is another business in itself. It's an active business, but it's not necessarily a passive investing in real estate, and which is an idea that most people think about when they think about investing in real estate. Yeah, so I could probably go into many directions with even those two experiences and long-term rentals and stuff like that. But yeah.
What's your focus today? I mean, 105 listings. What's your focus today when it comes to investing? And I love the fact that you broke down even active versus passive.
Totally. I think our goal now is to leverage real estate to create active income still. However, the goal is not to take that active income and then spend it in your lifestyle, into getting a bigger car, a bigger house, a bigger lifestyle, right? More vacations. The whole idea of a big, large active income is to then have money, right, and resources to be able to tackle on real estate opportunities where you can hold long term. So today, what we're really looking for is units, whether it's single family, duplexes, fourplexes, or even larger apartments that we can buy, increase rents, right? Let it appreciate, and have it create a cash flow on a monthly basis for us to get freedom, right? Freedom of time. If you can really pay attention to creating enough cash flow on a monthly basis, whether you work or not, right? Your monthly expenses are taken care of, then that's the goal. The goal is not to sell 100 houses and be the top real estate agent and then still have to do it again next year, right? The whole point to be the top real estate agent is for you to have surplus of active income to then invest into other things, whether it's real estate or not. I just think that as a real estate professional, why wouldn't you invest into real estate, which is what you're probably most well-versed around?
Mm-hmm. How would you go from the working in the business to the hat of looking at your business producing the cash to be an investor?
I think that you have to study, right? You have to become a student. because I've seen real estate agents not understand the real estate investment world and just continue to do sales, right? Or someone that flips houses and they just continue to flip houses and look for deals, but they never look at, well, what loan maybe could I get outside of hard money that I'd be able to hold this property with long term, right? So I think it's usually like being open enough and curious enough to look at, hey, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, really where would I need to be? And then from that perspective, then understanding what's worth learning and what's not worth learning, right? Just like you were saying, the shiny object issue that we see today is like, oh, people are Airbnb and all of a sudden they jump into Airbnb and maybe start one Airbnb and be like, it was not so profitable. So, oh, flipping houses, let me go try to flip a house, right? And they break even, lose money or make a little bit of money. And the next thing it's, let me do subject to and wholesaling because that's the next thing I saw, right? And I think that when you do that, what happens is that you never become the dominating expert in that industry. And I think that all big money is made by being a subject matter expert, right? By being the top person in whatever industry that you're in. So when I was doing Airbnb, because I was managing 105 listings, all my vendors gave me a discount, right? Because I brought them a volume of business. You know, when we flip houses, it was pretty wild, but we were flipping like six to 8 houses at a time in the Bay Area, which are like huge price points, right? But we had a lot of leverage because all our contractors knew that we were doing volume. Same thing with Kinetic Real Estate today, right? We're moving like 30 plus escrows a month. So every mortgage person, every vendor, every title, every person that comes into our office is trying to do business with us because we're dominating everywhere that we have our hands on.
Where could like people like start to get resources? Because you said educate yourself first. If you're going to become an investor, if you're going to take the hat out of, being a producer or being a real estate agent into an investor, is where could they learn how to flip or how to go into Airbnb? Should they go into finding a Juan in their world, a community group, a meetup? Like, where would you say somebody should start?
I would say it's easiest to start through podcasts and books, right? Because you don't need access to anyone else. I mean, you can download Audible today. You can go buy a book today. You can jump on a podcast. I mean, there's Bigger Pockets, all these different resources that you can go to already just to learn and hear about stories of people that have had success in certain industries. But I think that when you're ready to execute, I really believe that in order to accelerate that speed of learning is through learning from somebody that's already doing it or has already done it. So I'll give you an example. When we were in the Airbnb world, we weren't buying our own properties and we weren't flipping houses. We weren't truly investing in real estate. We were just running a massive hospitality operation, a short-term rental management company. And what happened is that when 2020 came around, Airbnb essentially refunded all of the guests and canceled all the reservations. And then the guests were refunded, but the hosts were kind of given the short end of the stick. And we had the responsibility of still paying these homeowners, right? That we agreed that we were going to pay them. And we didn't know the severity of what COVID was going to look like and what the shutdown and the global pandemic was going to look like. But what we came to the resolution to is that we're going to uphold our word, right? And we didn't know what that meant. So essentially what we ended up doing is that we continue to pay throughout COVID, even though we had no reservations. And I think that there was a first 24-hour window where they had announced that there were going to be shelter in place. I think we refunded probably like over $70,000 in 24 hours. And that's when it was like these are reservations that were already booked. They had already paid on their end. We just hadn't gotten paid on Airbnb, right? Because the reservation was coming up. So in that first 24-hour window, and you can imagine over the next few weeks what it actually accumulated to. But that really forced us to think outside of the box. We said, hey, well, people aren't going to travel. The Airbnb business, I mean, we're going to be in trouble if we just let this ride out. And that's when Kevin and I got together and we said, well, what can we do, right? What can we do to create a lump sum of income to float this business essentially? And that's actually when we came up with the idea of maybe we should flip houses because we could probably come up with like a large, profit in order to float that business. And that's a journey of itself. I had already been studying wholesaling and flipping houses for a while, but never had the reason of why I needed to do it until that moment. So we called a friend that was an investor that flipped houses already. We met with him that week. And long story short, 3 weeks later, we were looking at our first deal in San Leandro, California. And we picked it up. There's a longer story to that where 1 week before closing, the seller didn't want to close on the property because he wanted more money. After we had ratified agreement and like supposed to close, and then we hired a lawyer, it took a 6-month process in order to take that to the finish line, spent like 15 grand in lawyer fees, settled for another 35, like paid him another 35,000 to settle. And all in all, that was still a great turnout because we ended up making money from that first property that gave us the belief that we could do it. And then over the next 12 months, we did like another 5 houses. Over the next 12 months after that, we did like another 8. So it was out of necessity, really, that we were forced to do it. Sometimes I think it's a great idea to invest in real estate, but until you have to do it, then sometimes you don't take action.
First of all, I love the realness and the transparency because this is the real stuff that people don't always talk about. And I love how you brought it back because I'll never forget those times where during that time, we were with a hedge fund, some of the biggest and largest hedge funds here, and had to refund during spring training, like 7 figures. And it just didn't stop for a while. It seemed like when shelter was in place because we had spring training here. So, and I think that what you also brought up is what you do in times like that. When you're back to a wall, it's like, how creative can you actually get in those times? And I think that's a huge part of entrepreneurship, even in the real estate space, even as an agent. When you're back to all your escrows canceling at one time because of a hurricane or because of shelter in place or because interest rates have dropped, you're trying to figure out how can I get us to float and like pay our employees, even if it's through credit cards. I think that's when you get the most creative. And you said that earlier in the podcast, is when times shift is when you get to see true entrepreneurs rise up.
Totally. I agree with that 100%.
And I think you brought up a lot of things during our conversations. And one thing that I love about you and your wife is the value that you guys actually put on relationship. How important and why is that important to you guys? And how has that impacted your businesses and life?
I think it's also, it comes from a place of looking at the long term, right? So my wife and I, we were very involved in our church. We love the people that we work with. We spend a lot of time with with family and doing the things that really bring intrinsic value. I don't know if that's a very common word to use, but things that will be meaningful long term, right? Because this is what I say. I say people over profits. And what I mean by that is I'd rather put the relationship in people over making money this one time, right? Like if there's a transaction and the relationship is on the line, I would rather keep the relationship and not make a profit from that one transaction than make the profit and lose that one relationship. And that's what I mean by that. And the reason why is because I think if you look at this long term, my wife is actually much better than I am at creating like relationships. I am great once I get to know people. And once I get to establish like, okay, yeah, like we want to get to know people better. My wife just is a great relationship builder with everyone. Like I'll show up to a meeting and I was like, oh, how did you and Pri, my wife, met? And they're like, oh yeah, we were just at a coffee shop talking. And like now she invited them over to our church or invited them to one of our networking meetings or something along the lines. And I'm just like, she just has that gift that I don't. But anyway, so I think that the reason why is because then if you look at it long term, right? And what I mean by that is time is limited here, right? And even when I say this, I'm like, how do I think like this being young? And I don't know. I really don't, because I think about like when I'm in my deathbed, for example, right? Like, what are people going to remember? Are they really going to remember how successful I was? Or are they going to remember what their experience of our family was with them? And when I think about those things, then I value the relationship over the transaction, essentially, because those are the things that will live on, right? It's almost like that's the legacy that you will leave. And I really got a bigger sense of understanding of this when my grandpa passed in December of 2021, is at the time I saw his life and I said, wow, the last 10, 15, 20 years of his life, he didn't have an opportunity, right? What people remembered him for was his, years where he was most active, like doing something, whether it's through work, whether it's contributing to his family, all these different things. The later years of his life, he didn't, even though he wanted to, maybe he wanted to make a difference. Maybe he wanted to contribute to other people's lives. Maybe he wanted to be generous, but he no longer had the opportunity towards the later time of his life because of where he was positioned. So then it came to me and made me realize, like, your legacy is now. Like, what you're doing right now, the way you're interacting, the relationships that you're building, the way you're showing up for other people right now is what people will remember you for. And hopefully, maybe even in the later years, if you have the resources, you can continue to make an impact. But what is for sure is right now.
So well said. And as we talk about legacy, what is Juan's legacy, and what is something that you hope people will remember you for?
Totally. I think that this is like a moving target. I'm still figuring out myself. But what I've realized is seeing my parents are Chinese immigrants. They immigrated to Mexico. And then I spent 10 years in Mexico before coming to the States. And then they immigrated from Mexico to the United States. So I saw them just struggle and pay such a big price to get us to where we're at right now. My legacy is that I take it from here, of all the sacrifice that they've made, to then stretch it here in the greatest country in America, right, where opportunity is so abundant, to then take it to the next generation and have the next generation start at a different platform, right? To say, like, look, this is so much struggle that it took us to get here. It's my job and our family's job to take it from here until the next like level of the race, and then pass it on to where now we have a 4-month-old, and for him to start at a different start line, right? I think that's the first thing that comes to mind. The second thing is to just break generational, I call it curses, because it's the beliefs that you have growing up that you don't know are the wrong beliefs, right? That there isn't enough money, that there isn't, enough opportunity, that you're not smart enough, that you're not worthy, all of these different things, for me to, us and our family, like, break those barriers and then inspire those around me that it's possible, right? For people to look at my life and say, like, I have all these opposition and obstacles that I'm going through, but if we could be a light, right? To say, like, we came from so much adversity, poverty, like we came from Mexico, right? Third world country. So then to see all those examples and say, actually, someone has done it. Like, regardless of what all the opposition can be, like, someone has done it. And then for people to believe that it's possible for them. So that's kind of like where I'm at the moment. I think I have still yet to further develop, like, what our legacy really can be, or we want it to be.
So good. Where can people connect with you? You've brought a lot of knowledge to the table today, to this episode. I'm sure the community wants to connect with you, and we're going to also put in the show notes. Where can people connect with you?
Yeah, I think the easiest way would be through social media on Facebook, Instagram. Instagram username is ruan.dynasty. And on social media, Facebook, can look me up my name. I mean, I could drop my email, ruan, which is my last name, at kineticrealestate.com.
So honored to have you on our show. And as we wrap up, there's always one question that I ask every single guest on this show is, what does Juan do to play bigger in business and in life?
What I do to play bigger in business and life is always leveling up the rooms that I'm in, right? The people that I'm hanging out with, the coaches and mentors that I intentionally bring into my life. And I think that, not to make this an ad or anything, but like, our relationship with you has been such a huge impact to our business and even our personal lives. Like, one of the things that stands out the most to me about you, Raquel, is that a lot of people do things for the sales process, right? Which is like connect, contact, maybe even do something on their holidays or birthdays. But what you do is that you actually genuinely care for people. And I think that that's the biggest differentiating factor between like someone that's doing something for the process in which they have for their business versus someone that is actually creating a meaningful, genuine relationship and does care for their people. And that is something that I'm inspired by you on the way that you do that and show up for your people. But yeah, super excited to have had the opportunity to share with your audience, and yeah, super grateful.
Oh my gosh, you inspire me to play bigger. And I'm like tearing up, holding back my tears. So if anybody's watching this on YouTube, they'll definitely notice the difference. But thank you for your kind words. Thank you for just being a part of my life, you, Pri, and Roman. It's been a game changer. It's been something that I wake up to every day. I think about you, people like you guys that have impacted my life, and how can I serve them at such a high level. So thank you so much for being on the show. I cannot wait to keep playing bigger with you, my friend.
Thank you.